Hello and welcome to a new episode of Off Your Gord. I am your host, Jeffrey Gordon, and this is the sports show where we talk about things going on in the sports world, both in the United States and locally here in Burlington, Vermont. We've got a list of topics to talk about today. It's been a very, very busy, crazy March going on. We're going to talk about NFL free agency. We're going to talk about March Madness. We're going to have a local sports roundup, and we're going to talk about some other things going on in the sports world. So I want to start off by talking about NFL free agency. Or actually, no, I want to start off by talking about my love for top 10 lists in sports. When it comes to sports, all you need is a top 10 list to kind of get a feel for what's going on in the league. We got the worst teams in football. We got the best teams in football. It usually gives you a lay of the land with things around the world in sports. So we're going to do a new segment that I like to call Gordon's Gridiron. This is going to be the first time we're doing this. It's essentially me ranking my top 10 teams in the NFL or MLB, NBA. Doesn't matter the league. Whatever the league it is, we're going to rank the top 10 teams. So today, post-free agency edition of the NFL's Gordon Gridiron. It's going to be the top 10 teams in the NFL according to me. Coming in at number 10, I want to give it to the Houston Texans. Honestly, they kind of surprised me a little bit last year. I think we all expected them to be a Super Bowl contender early on. C.J. Stroud had such an impressive rookie season that I think the expectation, it was Super Bowl or bust really. And they came out slow. They came out really lethargic and slow. The offense was struggling really mightily. They really almost laid an egg against the Bears, so to speak. They lost to the Jets. It was a weird start to the season, and then they kind of figured it out, and then even ended up winning a playoff game. I think a lot of people penciled the Chargers in as beating them in the playoffs. That didn't happen. And they're one of these teams that I think is kind of adding by subtracting. You know, you hate to see a team lose good players, but I think there's certain players where you don't really mind losing because it'll allow your team to kind of elevate. Stephon Diggs and Laramie Tunsil are who I'm talking about here. Diggs signing just yesterday with the New England Patriots, and Laramie Tunsil getting traded to the Washington Commanders. Good players, both in their own rights, got paid huge contracts, but and I think in the long run this will be good for the Texans. They're both of those players getting up there in age. Both 10-year veterans in the NFL. So I think despite losing them, it's not going to hurt them too much. The offensive line is still a huge question mark, though. Laramie Tunsil's loss will be felt a little bit. Luckily, they did add Trent Brown to the mix. They signed him. That's a big signing. He's getting up there in age as well, but he's still very talented. Has spent time with the Bengals, the Raiders, the Patriots. He's still got a lot left in the tank. Coming in at number 9, I want to give it to the Los Angeles Rams. They're coming off a huge playoff win versus the Vikings. I think, a lot of people with how good the Vikings were in the regular season expected the Vikings to make a run at potentially the Super Bowl, but Sam Darnold, the lights got kind of too bright there at the end of the season for him, and the Rams, pounced. They beat the Vikings handedly in a different location. That game, remember, was supposed to be in Los Angeles, but the fires and that kind of weather event required that game to be shifted to Arizona. A lot of adversity there. They powered through. Almost beat the Eagles in the snow, which is a climate that Los Angeles indoor team, not familiar with playing in the snow. They nearly pulled that game out. And, who knows what would have happened if they had beaten the Eagles. Eagles obviously went on to win the Super Bowl. So, there's a lot to be hopeful for if you're a Rams fan. They did lose Cooper Kupp in the offseason, but they brought in Devontae Adams, former target of Aaron Rodgers, former Raider, former Jet, former Packer. He's getting up there in age as well, but still got some left in the tank. Unfortunately, Matthew Stafford, there was some weird contract negotiation stuff with them, but they've seemed to have figured that out. Stafford's getting up there in age a little bit. That's something to watch for this season. And another thing to watch, Kyron Williams had a great season, ran for a ton of yards, but he's got a fumbling problem. They've got to work that out if they want to take the next step, potentially be a Super Bowl team. Coming in at number 8, I think this is a bit of a hot take. I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks. They signed Sam Darnold, huge, big signing that they made. That's going to be big. He's coming off a borderline MVP level season. They're replacing Geno Smith with him, and Geno, I think a lot of people have been rooting for Geno, but the writing was kind of on the wall that his tenure in Seattle was, they can improve, and it looks like they have. If he's anywhere remotely close to what he was for all but 2 weeks of last season, Sam Darnold will be a huge improvement. Hopefully they're getting that quarterback and not the one that we saw completely lay an egg at the end of last season. There's been some big wide receiver room changes. DK Metcalf being traded with the Steelers, signing an extension with them immediately. Tyler Lockett leaving in free agency, longtime Seattle Seahawk. But they did bring in Cooper Kupp, former Ram, former division rival. They grab him to be Sam Darnold's new target. Obviously, they keep Jackson Smith in Jigba. He's had a great season, reaching the 1,000-yard threshold last year. So there's a lot to be hopeful for in Seattle. They signed DeMarcus Lawrence. He's a great pass rusher, formerly a Dallas Cowboy. And the only thing to watch, their offensive line does still have some issues. They obviously have Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, two very good players, but there's still a lot of questions there. Coming in at number 7, this team didn't really change much, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They did lose their offensive coordinator, which, you question how Baker Mayfield's going to respond to that change. Obviously, he had a borderline MVP season in his own right last year. You kind of wonder how he'll respond to that. But other than that, nothing really changed. They've made some decent additions, but nothing. They haven't lost anybody. Bucky Irving, their star running back from last year, he's playing like a traditional bell cow running back, a guy that you can hand the ball to on any down, and he'll get you production. The offensive line continues to get better. I think they knew they needed to bolster it after the offensive line essentially caused Tom Brady to retire in 2022. They've continually gotten better, made some draft picks. Graham Barton had an amazing rookie season last year. And they look to, potentially elevate themselves to that Super Bowl echelon. Coming in at number 6, I think this is a bit of a hot take as well. Dropping far is the Kansas City Chiefs. And trust me, this isn't just because of the absolute embarrassment that was the Super Bowl blowout against the Eagles. They've lost a lot in free agency. Justin Reed is a big one. They're kind of in a weird spot with Patrick Mahomes right now. I feel like they need to re-unlock him. These last 2 seasons, he's had very pedestrian stats and made very, he's I wouldn't call him a game manager. He's Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, he'll never be a game manager, but they've kind of taken a step back as to what they're allowing him to do, and I don't really think that's a winning formula. It's won them plenty of games, but I feel like they've especially last season, a lot of these games were way too close for comfort, and I don't think that's the way it needs to be. Travis Kelce has essentially made it clear that this is going to be his retirement season, and usually in some sports you may see this, but in NFL you really don't often see a guy basically commit to this being his final season before the season starts. But Travis Kelce's essentially done that, and I'm interested to see how that goes. His stats were kind of down in regards to his normal, I guess, standards you could call it, but he's Travis Kelce. Patrick Mahomes is going to look for him on any down of the game, to be honest. Number 5, the Detroit Lions. Their season kind of sputtered out, and you can really blame injuries for that. They were decimated, especially on defense, by their injuries. I think, honestly, if they even cut back the injuries that they took by half, they're making a run potentially at the Super Bowl. But unfortunately, Washington came into town during the divisional round and kind of got them into a whole shooting match. I think both teams put up well over 30 points, and unfortunately, they lost that game. But they've also lost some, interesting players that I think might have a bit of an effect. Carlton Davis, that was a big one. He was a star corner for them. Zadarius Smith, pass rusher, didn't really produce much for them, but it's still a sizable loss nonetheless. And Kevin Zeitler, one of their better offensive linemen. They have the best offensive line in football, and I'm not too worried about it. I think they're great at drafting offensive linemen, and they're great at, elevating offensive linemen. So I'm not too worried about that. But I'm interested to see how they respond. It's a bit of a prove-it year for Dan Campbell as well. He did lose both of his coordinators, so that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Number 3, we got the Washington Commanders, the team number 4, rather. We've got the Baltimore Ravens. Narratives are starting to develop about Lamar Jackson. He's made the playoffs pretty much every year he's been a starter in the NFL, with the exception of 1 year, and he's been a great player, an MVP level player. Arguably should have won it last year, depending on who you ask. But he's developing a mantra as a playoff choker. It's getting to the point. They've lost. They've made one AFC championship. That was last year. They lost that game. I think a lot of people penciled them in as beating the Bills. They lost that game. So narratives are starting to develop. They've got to really, really prove it this year that Lamar is not a playoff choker, so to speak. I think any of these top 4 teams can win the Super Bowl, by the way. Usually these top 4 teams are kind of my Super Bowl bubble. Anybody outside of that, I think, is a little ways off, but can definitely jump into that Super Bowl bubble. Number 3, it's the Washington Commanders. What a season they had last year. Who expected them to get as far as they did? Jaden Daniels had an incredible rookie season, one of the best all time, maybe the best rookie season by a quarterback in NFL history. They haven't changed much about the roster. They did make the big signing of Laramie Tunsil. He struggled with penalties as a Texan towards the end there. I'm interested to see if he can bounce back on the Commanders. And one thing to watch, C.J. Stroud had a bit of a sophomore slump. If you look in the past, Dak Prescott, back in the past, he had a sophomore slump. A lot of these quarterbacks with insane rookie seasons, incredible rookie seasons, don't always match that in their sophomore year. Will the same thing happen to Jaden Daniels is an interesting question, something to monitor. I think he'll be very good. I don't think he'll win MVP or anything like that, but he'll be up there. He'll be one of the more productive quarterbacks in football. He's an absolute phenom. Number 2, we've got the Buffalo Bills coming off a heartbreaking AFC Championship loss to the Chiefs. They need to get over the hump. Simple as. They've lost to the Chiefs. Granted, they've beaten them in the regular season, but the regular season's like horseshoes. Getting close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So they need to get over the hump that is Kansas City once and for all. The question I think a lot of people are asking is, did Josh Allen really deserve MVP? My answer, I think when you talk about most valuable, that is Josh Allen. Maybe he didn't have as good a stats as Joe Burrow, as Lamar Jackson, but I would say he's more valuable to his team and his roster than those 2 quarterbacks are to theirs. They made some great signings. They didn't lose many people as well. They did sign Joey Bosa. That's going to be a huge addition. And number 1, did anybody expect otherwise? It's the Philadelphia Eagles. They have by far the best roster in the league. You look at every single position on the field. They're elite. It's quite outstanding how Howie Roseman has constructed this roster into being just nearly unstoppable. Jalen Hurts, it's hard to argue that he's a weak point considering how good of a Super Bowl he had. But when you've got top 5 players at every other position on the field pretty much, and your quarterback is just top 10, oh no. You could make the argument Jalen Hurts is the weak point, but even then, it's hard to call him a weak point of anything. They're a well-oiled machine, and I think they have a great chance to go back-to-back. Bit of a live wire at head coach, though. I don't know if I always trust Nick Sirianni, but what does it matter what I say? He's a Super Bowl champion now. Next, I want to talk about March Madness. The Sweet 16 is set in both the men's and the women's tournaments. The action kicks off once again on the 27th tomorrow. It's been action-packed, maybe not as action-packed as in years past. There's not as many buzzer beaters or crazy last-second moments, but we did see a huge, shocking buzzer beater moment yesterday. Maryland had a buzzer beater to stave off elimination in a back-and-forth battle against the massive underdog that was Colorado State. Colorado almost pulled off the upset as a 12 seed to Maryland's 4 seed. Colorado almost had a buzzer beater in their own right. I think that they took the lead last with, I want to say, 2 or 3 seconds left in the game, but just Maryland pulled it out, and they emerged victorious. They're moving on, trying to get into the Elite 8. And UConn's reign, I'm a Connecticut guy at heart. That's where I was born. Their dominance comes to an end. They're not going back-to-back-to-back. No three-peat in store for them. Their quest ended in a second-round loss to 1 seed Florida. It's a down year for upsets in the men's tournament, though. The lowest remaining seed is just the 10-seeded Arkansas. In the women's side of things, South Carolina remains nearly unstoppable in women's college basketball. They're a well-oiled machine, just as I said the Philadelphia Eagles are earlier. They are absolutely dynamite, and I think they go and win another championship this year. However, the UConn women are back. One of the greatest dynasties in American sports, UConn basketball, whether it's the men's or the women. The women, Gino Auriemma, great head coach. They've had blowout wins against Arkansas State and South Dakota State. They look to get back to the Elite Eight and potentially back to another national championship. And finally, I want to talk about local sports and the kind of just a roundup segment of the things going on in the sports world. For UVM, let's start off with UVM. It's a bit of a disappointment for the men's in college basketball. They didn't make the tournament. The women, however, were the 15th seed. They ended up losing, unfortunately, to the NC State Wolfpack. For hockey, it was a season that is probably better off forgotten. Both the men's and the women's college hockey teams finished well under 500. And finally, the University of Vermont men's football team is still undefeated since 1974. And with that, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. We talked about a lot of things today. We had football, top 10 teams after free agency. We had college basketball, and then we had the opportunity to talk about some local sports. We're going to be back next week. We're going to have a whole new list of topics, probably some NASCAR, a little bit of NASCAR in there, a little bit of basketball, a little bit of professional hockey, the NHL. And you have all that to look forward to next week. This has been Off Your Gourd. I'm your host, Jeffrey Gordon. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.